So we are honored to welcome Mr. Sandeep Bose, the founder and CEO of Axio AI, to today's leadership talk. With a career spanning global finance institutions and startups, Mr. Bose has led transformative AI and data-driven initiatives across organizations like Silicon Valley Bank, Amex, and now steering Axio in India's emerging tech landscape. He brings a rich perspective on leadership, digital disruption, and future of AI in enterprise. I'd like to request our CEO and Director, Jaya ma'am, to present a small token of appreciation to Mr. Sandeep Bose.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to give a small introduction to Sandeep, and we go way back, right? So we go back to 2010, and I had just made a shift from marketing into technology. So I had been hired by Cognizant to set up their very new and fledgling consulting practice. I did not know too much about technology. And after 3 months of being in Cognizant, my boss said, Jaya, we are sending you to Phoenix, right? And you're going to American Express. So I said, okay. And they said, there is this thing that is happening there, but we're not able to solve it. I think you can do this. So go there. So I packed my bag, and I had never really been out of the country. I mean, I was when I was a very young child, 4-5 saal ki thi, so I was in Africa with my parents, right? But I had not really traveled outside. So here's this girl who's never stepped out, right? And I land in Phoenix. Sandeep calls me, and I'm jet lagged, right? And I'm like dead to the world. And he went, oh, I'm so sorry, recovered, and then we'll talk. And then of course I settled, and then I went there, and he said, he gave me the business problem, and the business problem I will never forget. I don't know whether you remember, but it was about how do we increase, or how do we approve credit limits. And the point was that it was, you want to give credit to those who are credit worthy faster rather than, take longer, because you'll make more money if they're credit worthy, you want to give the credit. And the whole objective was that can we reduce the days to give credit, okay? To find that this person is more credit worthy and then to do it. And they were deploying Pega. See, I remember everything. And I didn't know what Pega was at all, right? And so I land there, I say, okay, this is an interesting thing. And then we started doing interviews. Obviously, I did something right, because when I presented to him, he said, yes, we will work with Cognizant. Now, my assumption is he liked what I never asked him. Wasn't me. But for me, it was a game changer, because my department within Cognizant, it used to be called CNDS, Content and Design Services, landed their first big ticket project. And at that time, if I remember right, there were 3 or 4 projects. That particular project was for 125,000 USD, and total together it was about 450,000 USD. It was the single largest project that Cognizant Content and Design Services got. And it was the beginning of my career in technology, in consulting. But my big lesson at that time was, you need to find someone who takes a bet on you. And that for me was Sandeep, and so I'm so grateful, because I stand here today because you gave me that confidence.
That's very kind.
And from there, Cognizant grew. We were a 36 million business unit to 230 million, annual turnover, which if you ask people, they will still recognize and attribute it to me. But that's what needs the team and the confidence that Sandeep gave. And so as you embark on, and then of course you know my career trajectory after that, but it was him, this is the source. So he is the source of my confidence in technology, and that is what I wish for you. And so when he offered to say, hey, I can come over, I'd love to work with your students, I said I couldn't be more grateful. So Sandeep Bose.
Good evening, everyone. Jaya and everyone from MICA have been so kind and so gracious. First of all, thank you. I'm just thrilled to be here and talking to all of you. Jaya asked me to talk a little bit about myself first, so I'll do that. And then I have a few questions, and I hope this is a very interactive session. I'm not going to be standing here and lecturing you, at least not today. So my background is I grew up in India in a military family. My dad was in the Indian Army, so we grew up all over the country. So when Indra said, "Oh, you are Sandeep Bose, you must be from Kolkata," I'm like, actually I'm not. I grew up in the north, and I went to do my computer engineering in Pune University.
Guys, please.
Started my career here in the country, worked for a variety of technology companies, and then I moved to the US in 2000. So I've been there for about 25 years. And I met Jaya when I had just started in American Express. And just like Jaya said that it was a big pivotal moment in her career, it was one in mine as well, because that was the first time I realized the impact of user experience in technology. I had an intuitive sense of user experience, and I have always been a creative person. I'm very interested in music. I'm a movie buff, so if you want to talk to me about movies, I would love to chat about that. But especially creative media and user experience, my first foray into that was with Jaya. So I told you about my technology background. I worked at IBM for 10 years. I worked at American Express for 15 years. I was the CIO for risk management for about 6 of those years. I was the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for a large bank in the US called Silicon Valley Bank. And then after 30 years of corporate life, I finally managed to do what I've always wanted to do, which is become an entrepreneur. So for the last couple of years, I became an entrepreneur, and we built this very exciting enterprise AI product. And I'll give you a little glimpse of what is it that we do, what is it that I believe in. But before that, I want to ask you a few questions. Question number 1 is, how many of you have used any kind of AI in the last 24 hours? Just shout out. Just Perplexity. Napkin. I don't know what that is. What is what is napkin? Visualization. So very interesting that all of you, in your mind, AI immediately brought some sort of conversational AI. There's so many other applications of AI that you use every single day. My daughter is 18 years old, so probably about the same age as some of you. And when I asked her, I said, when you get up in the morning, what is the first thing you do? She's like, brush my teeth. I said, no. You actually open Spotify and start that. Spotify recommendations are nothing but AI. Then you drive to school. Even though your school is 10 minutes away, you start Google Maps, an AI application. And I rattled off 20 different AI applications that she uses every single minute of every single day. You are looking at, you're always on Instagram, all the Instagram recommendations AI. So what are the favorite AI applications that you have aside from ChatGPT and Claude and Napkin? What else do you use that is very interesting to you?
Face ID.
Face ID?
11 Labs.
What is 11 Labs?
So 11 Labs allows you to build chatbots and video agents that you can then integrate into your website.
I see. Any others?
Suno AI. It's a music creation.
Music creation? Okay, very cool.
Runway Aurora.
Runway?
It's an AI. Runway Aurora.
Runway.
It's an AI for turning images into videos.
Okay, cool. Okay, the second question, and you can't say ChatGPT again. So, when we say AI in a business context, not for personal use, which brand or company comes to mind? Microsoft, Copilot, Google. What else?
Watson X.
Huh?
Watson X.
Watson? Salesforce? Gemini?
SAP Labs. SAP Labs.
SAP Labs?
MICA AI. Adobe.
So, when I give you another example, you might think that, oh, why didn't I think about this in the context of business AI? When you order something from Swiggy, how do they make the determination of showing you how long it will take to deliver? That's AI in business, right, for them? What else?
Netflix recommendations system.
Netflix recommendations? I don't know how many of you know that the image that you see, that's actually tailored to each one of your tastes. Did you know that?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. When I first learned, I'm like, oh wow. That if I click on a lot of images that have headshots, so you'll see on my Netflix page, the same movie will look different from my wife's Netflix page. So very interesting. Okay, final question before I start my talk. So, you are all in the creative field, branding, strategy, marketing. How do you feel about AI in the creative field? Threat or co-pilot? How many of you think that it is a threat? Very few of you think it's a threat. Everyone else thinks it's a co-pilot?
Yes.
It's not going to eat all the jobs? No?
Not all.
Not all.
Not all.
Some of them. Alright, so what I want to talk about, by the way, can you hear me in the back without the mic? How many of you are familiar with this brand that's going to show up on the screen? Are you familiar with this?
Yes.
So, when I had created my presentation yesterday to come and talk to you guys, I had created a fictitious company. But then after lunch with Indranil, he said something which made me come up with a real example. So I'm actually going to talk to you about a real case study that we'll work on in the next 30, 40 minutes. So all I ask you is interrupt me, ask questions, share your perspectives. Okay. If I don't need a mic, then. what we're going to do is, we're going to try and figure out the anatomy of an AI solution that we are going to design together. So by the end of this session, I hope you have a lot more insight into how an actual enterprise AI solution is built and implemented, and you use it to realize value. So I'm thinking about how do we go from insights to intelligent action. Okay, so what do I mean by that? How many of you know the difference between generative AI and predictive AI?
So, predictive AI is often used when there's empirical data and you want to make a prediction on it. Generative AI generally uses natural language processing, which is LLMs, where it's able to generate based on pattern recognition that it already is fed into the data.
Okay.
So, both of these are working in tandem, but are working towards AGI. And there's a lot of debate on which will get there first.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Any others? So another simple example that, or explanation that I think of is generative AI often tells you what you can do. It's creative. It helps you generate new things, not just text, it helps you generate videos and images and creative content. But it's almost like there is no adult supervision. It's a drug-addled teenager which is creating new things. Predictive AI is the adult supervision which tells you what you should do. So we are going to explore that in this context of from insight to action. How do you use both generative AI and predictive AI in tandem? So there are 3 steps that we're going to talk about. Now, some of you, all of you may have experienced BI dashboards, basic analytics, things that tell you what happened in the past. It gives you a number. What's the problem with that? Not problem with that. What is the limitation with that?
So since it's historical data and it cannot really predict the changes in the future and the current market forces that are affecting it.
So it tells you what happened, it doesn't tell you what is going to happen in the future. What are the limitations? In a typical analytics, BI type project?
So we need scores of data. If the data is limited, then it actually is not a very predictable or reliable.
Okay. Anyone else? So the limited, go ahead.
So the presentation of data sometimes also not very good, so we are not able to easily interpret and show us, get the insight from the data in a very particular manner.
Okay.
Sir, we are at the mercy of our knowledge on what KPIs to see and on the dashboard, as well as if there is some missing data, there is very limited mechanisms on how to extrapolate those missing data.
Okay. So basically what you're saying is that it told you what happened in the past, it's not going to tell you what is going to happen. And if the data is limited, the data limitation is going to impact everything, right? It's going to impact your future predictions as well. But if we just think of traditional BI historically has been focused on this is what happened. It's an insight. It doesn't tell you what's going to happen. It also doesn't tell you why something happened. It does not tell you what you should do. And does it matter? You had a sales, if I tell you you had a sales of $500,000, what are you going to say? Be excited? Be despondent?
It would depend on whether is it a down or an up.
Exactly.
Gain.
It depends on context. If you have always been a $100,000 business and suddenly one quarter you had $500,000, then it's reasons to celebrate. But if you've always been $750,000 business and suddenly your business dropped, then it's a problem. That is the problem with just a number that doesn't give you any context and is backward looking. So, we are going to explore the limits of traditional analytics. Now, as a marketer, as a strategist, what is your dream? At least tell me one dream, one holy grail. You are trying to reach customers, consumers. How do you want to reach them? Stories, narratives.
At least cost.
At the least cost.
To deliver a higher impact campaign at a lower resource constraint. So,
But to whom?
to the target audience that you've segmented.
To the segment. Okay. So if I have 1 million consumers, so let's say we go back to our example, the source. Sorry, source. Oh, sold store. The sold store. So the sold store, let's say they have 1 million customers. How many segments should we have?
So it depends on the basis of demographics, psychographics.
Okay. But how many? 10, 1,000, million? An important question, right? As a marketer, you need to be able to say that if I'm trying to segment my customers, what is the ideal situation? If you could, what would you aim for? What would you strive for?
One segment.
A segment of 1, which means you will segment the 1 million consumers into 1 million different segments. That's the holy grail. However, we will examine what are the challenges that happen when you start to approach it that way. Because the technology is now there. It allows you to create a segment of 1. But it also brings a lot of practical challenges. So we will explore those together. And we'll talk about the actual solution. We'll think about how to approach this problem. So let's dig a little deeper into this whole rear view mirror and the data first fallacy. What does that mean? We talked about this a little bit. Traditional BI, rear view. What happened, but doesn't tell you why it happened. Doesn't tell you if there was any seasonality in your data. We were working with Harley Davidson, and they had an assumption that they have some seasonality. Why is that important to know that there is seasonality?
So they can push their products more when there is a season.
Correct. So if you know that people are not going to buy in a certain period, then why would I run my promotions and my discounts during that? It's waste of money. So seasonality is important to know for a variety of reasons. At the same time, it's also important to know what do anomalies look like. Because the pattern is not always exactly the same every month, every quarter, every week. There are anomalies, and you need to understand what those anomalies are and what causes those anomalies. This doesn't tell you any of that. That's the challenge with traditional BI. So, what do you do then? So now, let's start our assignment. So you are the marketer for the sold store. Your data science team told you, of our 1 million consumers, we are very sure that these 5,000 customers are very likely to churn. They're likely to leave the franchise. You don't want that, right? Why don't you want that? Because acquiring new customers is a lot harder and a lot more expensive than retaining existing customers. So customer churn is a big problem, and especially as a marketer, you need to understand that. So now, so what do you have? You have an insight. You now know that these 5,000 customers are very likely to churn. What don't you have? So what the heck am I going to do? There is a gap between, so you have the data, you have the insight, but you have no clue on what you're going to do about this. So there is a gap between data, insight, and action. What you really want is some sort of recommendation or prescription to say this is what you should do with these 5,000 customers to try and retain them. And this is how you proactively engage the rest of your customers so that 5,000 doesn't become 7,000 and 10,000. Okay? So remember we talked about the rear view mirror problem. All of you know what a KPI is? Key performance indicator. In simple terms, it's a metric. But it's a metric that is important for your business. That's why it's a key performance indicator for your business. One of the key performance indicators. So we talked about, so far we have been looking at standard KPIs that traditional BI gives you and all of the challenges of that. You had 500,000 or some in sales. Okay, so what? Why? What's going to happen? So what we have developed is this idea of transforming this static KPI into what we call a super KPI. So what is a super KPI? A super KPI starts with, the first thing it does is, it does a detailed, deep diagnosis of that KPI. What happened? Why did it happen? What were the contributing factors? Was there any seasonality? Were there any trends? Are there any correlations between different variables that influence this particular metric, etc., etc.? It does a deep diagnosis of every single metric and it presents it in a very easy to understand manner. So that's step one. So now we have gone from a static KPI to understanding a little more about why something happened. From there, you go to adding more context. How do you add more context? You add more data. Now typically, in my experience, and in a lot of the conversations I have with prospective clients and customers, they are very afraid of using their own data, let alone external data. So I'll give you a few examples. Now, we talked about Harley Davidson. What external variables do you think might affect their sales?
Governmental tax policies or tariffs.
Tariffs, okay. Why?
It would make the cost more, it would increase the cost,
Okay.
and that would reduce, and it's a elastic demand.
Okay. Tariffs go up, cost increases, then you either eat that cost, which reduces your profitability if you're keeping the cost for the customer the same, or you increase the cost and sales go up.
Competitors coming up with better models.
Competitors coming up with better models. More
New regulations with respect to emission norms.
new regulations.
EV market.
EV market.
Maybe controversy related to the brand?
Controversy related to the brand. There could be so many factors. Gas prices or petrol prices that simply can erode a lot of sales. The consumer sentiment, because there is something else happening which the consumer sentiment is impacted, because of which your motorcycle sales are. If you do not have all of that data and all of that context, how the heck are you going to know what's going to happen in the future? How do you plan? And what is the ripple effect of that? If you don't understand the demand, if you don't understand your future sales, what are the other challenges that will happen?
You do not know how much to manufacture.
You wouldn't know how much to manufacture. You wouldn't know how much inventory to keep. You wouldn't know whether I should sell only in the US or in India or in any of the European countries, etc. There are all sorts of challenges that start to happen because everything is connected. But if you don't have the data, if you don't have the context, if you don't start to understand not just internally that I reduced prices and therefore my sales went up, there is something that happened in some other country which impacted the consumer sentiment, and boom, it has a big correlation with my sales. You have to understand. So context is very important. So what we have done is, we have added a ton of externally available data and used that to understand the correlation and the specific impact on that particular variable. In this case, in this example, sales. Foresight. So let's move from what happened to what will happen. And it's not enough to say what will happen. It is also very important to say what is going to cause that to happen. What are the factors that are going to impact my future sales? So some of you said in the Harley Davidson example that if a competitor comes up with a new model, what about if Harley Davidson comes up with a new model? What happens to their best-selling model? There may be cannibalization of that, but you don't know for sure. So you have to test, and you have to have the data to understand that over the last 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, has it really impacted my sales? Is there a correlation between that data? So all of those are very, very important to understand. Foresight. What is going to happen in the future, not just what happened in the past. And then what else is important? How much is the impact? Is it a 1% impact or is it an 8% impact? Or is it a minus 4% impact? And how long will that impact last? How long before it impacts? So suddenly, you start to realize there are all these questions that traditional BI never answered. That something happened in the world, tariffs went up, but the impact is not tomorrow. The impact happens 3 months later, and it stays for 2.5 weeks, typically. Isn't that important for you to understand as a marketer, as a business leader? So, foresight. And then finally, command. So what we say as a tagline is, don't just watch the score, shape the outcome. What we mean by that is, instead of just looking at your BI dashboards, what if you could start to move these needles and say, proactively if I move these 5 needles, either from 0 to plus 100% or 0 to minus 100%, what would the impact be? And you can see it live, almost as a digital twin of your business process. So if you moved something, if you increase the discount, or if you, there could be hundreds of variables like this. But you are doing it safely in a sandbox. Because now you have understood all of the variables that impact or are likely to impact your future. And you now start to move them, and you can use that to make business decisions. Data-driven business decisions. And the good news is that with the improvement in technology and generative AI and AI at large, and the kinds of products that we are building, you can do this. You don't need to be a data scientist. So far, everything that I have talked about, I didn't use the word LLM or RAG or anything, right? You understand this. This is the world you live and breathe in. So you can do this. So before I move forward, does this make sense? Are you clear?
Yes.
Why it is important to move from static KPIs to super KPIs? So let's talk about the segment of one. How can you use generative AI to do something that I think it's unlikely that you have used generative AI in that form. So let me show you an application which you might find interesting. So, you are the marketer in the sold store, right? Your job is to create segments. If any one of you was trying to come up with these segments, how many segments do you think you can come up with that are truly impactful? Let's try. So go. Or whoever wants to go.
So on the basis of age and the area that they live in, what kind of occupation they have, like if it's a student or something.
Okay. So demographics, age, income, zip code, pin code, behavior. Say more. What kind of behavior?
So, Soul Store happens to be a brand where it's very youth-centric,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of merchandising also which is involved with
Yeah.
the Soul Store products.
Yeah.
So, we need to realize how Soul Store is directly targeting the youth and people who are generally interested in the pop culture.
Okay. So now you're trying to target the youth who buy from the sold store. So if you're trying to understand their psychographics, give me a few examples of what would you look for?
It's also the purchasing patterns. I mean,
Okay.
For example, if I have a friend's hoodie that I got from Soul Store,
Mhm.
and if I like the quality of it, I would like to go for another one. So
Okay.
you get a lot of repeat purchases that way if the
Okay.
quality is good.
So maybe people who buy, have some fandom of friends or some whatever they are. So you want to understand what do you like and what do you like and what do you like.
Right.
Therefore, I can target that kind of merchandise to you. Okay. So demographics, psychographics. What else? Actually, that's not technically psychographic. That's more purchase patterns. But okay. What else?
Cultural insights. So, for example, if it's a festive season, certain. So it's Soul Store usually focuses on fusion wears as well.
Okay.
So in a particular Diwali season, for example, they can have a blend of Diwali, products centered around Diwali, and for example, let's say at the same time, Coldplay concert is going on. So something of a fusion.
Diwali and Code.
So yeah, some sort of and now Coldplay concert will be a culture in that particular time period, so it will be a fusion. So basically understanding culture values.
So like whether they are first time users or second time users,
Okay.
whether they buy regularly or not.
Okay. Something else?
The frequency of purchase, the average ticket size, and where they are purchasing, because we have both offline and online. So, for example, if they are purchasing only in sale, so we can target them during the sale period. If they are purchasing offline, this gives
So
us-
when are they buying?
Yeah, exactly.
How much are they buying for?
They can also categorize, as you mentioned, according to the daily routines. Like night dresses can be different category, even the casuals and formals can be different category.
what is the average time they spend on the site? While browsing?
Average time on the site.
I think SourceStore is a brand that caters to youth specifically. They really know about the culture, the pop culture, and really relevant data which resonates with whatever youth wants. And they also go for style too, because they are focusing on hoodies and types of t-shirts that what people of our generation wear on a day-to-day basis. So that's how they segment their.
So what seems to be selling the most
Yes.
and resonating the most, push those merchandise.
Another thing that they really push is their made in India brand. So that sort of ideology.
So brand, vision, mission. Okay.
So now SourceStore also has offline stores. So what type of people are coming to the offline?
Okay. So now, based on the responses that you heard, you and your colleagues provided, what is your is there a big aha?
So for every one, the correlation is different. So we can segment them on the basis of correlations.
So everyone came up with a different segment based on what is top of their mind, or what is their experience or expertise, because that's what naturally or intuitively comes to you. So let's say you were an actual marketer who had been doing this for the last 5 years or 10 years. You probably would have come up with more precise segments. So instead of saying, I'll do it based on income and age, you probably would have said, I know that income doesn't really play such a role, but age does. Or I know that these repeat buyers or social events that are happening, that have a big influence, and so on, right? Now the challenge with that is, any one marketer has a very narrow set of experiences as compared to 100 marketers or 1,000 marketers. Because what you saw here, what all of you came up with, it's very unlikely that one of you would have come up with all of those. Right? Would you agree?
Yes.
Have you ever thought using generative AI to do this?
Yes.
You have? And how would you go about creating segments using generative AI?
Explain the product, see where which market really wants the product, and we can explain it in a way that makes the AI understand where we are trying to target.
So what is really important is, what is a segment? A segment is nothing but a collection of business rules. Right? If the customer age is less than this and greater than this, and they live in this location, and they have purchased previously, and they all, you get the idea. It's a collection of business rules, or it is a business rule. What do you need for business rules? You need the variables that you believe are relevant: age, income, past purchase history, etc., etc. What else do you need? Huh? Limits. You need the value. You need the greater than, less than, between, whatever else, right? So in data science term, these are features. And you could have internal features. Everything that you described were a combination of, some of them are internal data that SourceStore will have. Some of them is not internal data. If they are not tracking the correlation of festivals and these kinds of events like Coldplay, they would have no historical knowledge of how they impact their sales. So they can't use that variables or those features. So I'll share this with you offline if you're interested. I did this exercise offline, and I came up with a set of features that may be relevant. So purchase history. Which specific SKU do they buy? Just knowing that they buy is not good enough. Do they buy that particular hoodie with the Friends logo or not? What product category? Are they interested in characters? What themes? What is the purchase timestamp? How long ago did they buy? What is the order value? Which pages did they view? Etc. If you notice, none of you came up with a lot of these variables. But it took me, I have no experience in consumer products. It took me less than 15 minutes to come up with this list. And if you were an expert marketer, you would have immediately said, this is good, but it's not comprehensive enough. Let me refine it. That's what you can do. As you gain more experience, use generative AI as a co-pilot. Maybe first just understand what features are important. Internal features, external features. And then you can start to create segments. Segment number 1. If you said that I want to buy this but it was not in stock and please inform me, that is the highest intent of purchase, right? Because you explicitly said that when it comes back in stock, please let me know. It's very unlikely that any of you would have come up with this segment. You put it in the cart and then you left for some reason. Again, very unlikely. If you are an expert marketer, probably. But as you are developing, the time it would take you to become an expert marketer can be shortened. Because you have this unfair advantage of a co-pilot that didn't exist and it's not available, and most marketers don't use this. They depend too much on their intuition and experience. You can leapfrog. Just one very, very simple example that you can start doing tomorrow. So now you came up with 10 segments, 15 segments, 100 segments, whatever number of segments. Okay, so now what? How do you get to the segment of 1? Let's say you created 100 different segments. You divided that entire million consumers into 100 segments. But I don't like to be considered a cohort. I want to be treated as that single individual. So how do you convert that into a segment of 1?
So perhaps you find the commonality between the different segments and then create one segment out of it.
So segments are inherently buckets or categories. Now within that category, now you are saying, how do I identify each of them uniquely? That is where you can start to use predictive AI. So you can start with generative AI, narrow that down, and then start saying, let me score. So your past purchase is different from her past purchase. Your interest in Coldplay is much lower than her interest in Coldplay. So even though they are in the same segment, you can still further bucket them using predictive AI. So now you have a segment of 1. Now what's the challenge? What's the next challenge? Is the dream achieved? Yes? No? Maybe? No? Why not? Huh?
Implementation hasn't been.
Okay, you have not implemented yet. Okay, let's assume you have. Let's assume you have this entire thing implemented in a workflow, it's working beautifully. What's the next challenge? There's a practical challenge.
So measure the impact and can we scale with this?
Yes, that is important, but there is a practical challenge and limitation to this segment of 1.
So human behavior can change any day. So what segment, it is not necessary that it will work.
Fair. Recommendations are inherently non-definitive, right? But I like YouTube's recommendations more than I like Netflix's recommendations. But some people like Netflix's recommendations. So that's fine. Because recommendations inherently is not a deterministic problem. The challenge is, how many SKUs does SoulStore have? Even if they have 1 million customers, they probably have 1,000 SKUs with 50 different price points and 10 different promos. There is a finite number of things that you can curate. So even if you have 1 million customers, it's likely that you only have 1,000, 100,000 possible offers that you can create that are highly curated. That's the practical challenge. So the point is that even though you are trying to do hyper-personalization, you always have to keep in mind on what will you do once you are able to hyper-personalize and identify that one individual. Is there a practical way of you being able to give them a very specific promotion or an offer? If so, fantastic. Amazon probably can, because they have 100 million things and they have a marketplace with another 10 million merchants. They can create almost infinite number of offers and promotions for you. SoulStore probably can't. So you have to understand the context of the business that you're in. Okay, so now let's quickly go to, now you know whom you want to target. You have all the variables. You have all the segments. You have also implemented predictive AI so you can score each of them. Okay, now what? Now what do you do? Number one, timing is super important. For you to have a conversion, you have to identify the right person, give them the right offer at that particular moment. So matching, you can do through AI. Timing also you can figure out through AI. But stringing them together into a workflow that works at that instant is not that easy. But that's not your job. You will recommend that that is what we should do, and the engineers and the other designers, they have to implement that solution. But for you, you have to know that matching and timing are important for you to really convert that sale. What is the next thing that is important? How do you frame it? What do you say? How do you say it? Very, very important. And you guys are experts in it, or at least becoming experts in it. So you can advise whichever companies you're working with or working for that now generative AI can really help here. For each person, once you understand the anatomy of that person, not literally, but the virtual anatomy of that person, you can really tailor the message to them. And you can also decide, is it a pop-up message? Is it a video? Is it a recommendation from a friend? Is it whatever? You can be really creative. And the third is, how do you help them navigate and discover? So if you did all of these things, then the likelihood of success increases. There is no guarantees in life. But you are likely a much better marketer, a much better creative person with the use of AI in a very practical sense. So to summarize, what did we talk about? There is a human-centric blueprint. You could have all the data in the world. But what most people struggle with is, oh shit, which of these data elements has the highest impact? If you don't know that, it doesn't matter how many millions of dollars you spend creating this beautiful data lake which has 500,000 elements. Zero use. But now, even as a marketer or a creative person, you can provide a lot of guidance on what features are likely to be important. And then somebody can say, oh, I know that these elements are found in these 2 tables, and those elements are found in those other 5 tables. You can provide a lot of guidance to the data. A 360 view of the customer. We talked about context. Add internal data, external data, different engineered variables, and generative AI can really help there. Again, you don't have to be a data engineer, but you can provide add a lot of value and provide a lot of guidance to your teams and colleagues to say, here is what I think might be relevant in this context. And what I did, another thing that I'll share with you offline, is this was between I had lunch with Indranil and I came here in about 20 minutes. I did a deep research on the source code, which not just talks about what AI initiatives might be relevant, but it gives you a detailed business analysis without looking at their data, just externally available data. You have this power in your hands now. All you have to do is utilize it. What is their ecosystem? What is their likely AI readiness? How do you create this thing called a fandom graph? Because you have to understand what they are fans of, and so on. A dual AI engine, generative AI alone is not enough. It's fantastic and it's very easy to use, but it's not sufficient. You have to combine it with predictive AI to get real value or deliver real value for your businesses or your clients. And very, very important, somebody I think mentioned this, it's very important to measure. That if I did this, if I tried that, what is the impact? Should I continue doing this or should I stop? Continue to test, continue to iterate. Only possible through a very good feedback loop. So that's all I had for today, and Indranil is giving me his eyes to say time is up. So I'll stay here for as long as you want me to. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but I hope that this was of value to you. Thank you.
I had just one thing. When we were discussing the example of Harley Davidson, does the increase in fuel price really affect those who are, riding it?
So, very interesting question. When we did the actual analysis, we analyzed about 8 years of historical data. And what we found that gas prices did have an impact, but it was of our 10 top 10 contributors, it was I think the number 8, and it had like a point some percent correlation. So it was still a correlation, but not that high. Consumer price index actually had a higher correlation than even gas prices. But the highest impact in their context was the promos that they run. The highest was the seasonality. There are people who buy in a certain season, that was the highest predictor.
I had one question. When you were mentioning about the segmentation of the customer, so one customer, one segment, when you're talking about that, so the features that you have in that, are those fixed or are those dynamic as well?
So great question. It always depends on the context. So what I do and what I recommend to people is start with the business context. That today the features you came up with can change tomorrow. So they are dynamic, no question. But the bigger question is, how did you come up with the features that you think might be relevant now and are relevant 3 months from now or 6 months from now? every business also has a different cyclic nature, right?
I was also thinking from the customer's perspective that their behavior will also change over the years. So, because if you're creating a unique customer ID for X, parameters, if that changes and if the customer's preferences change, do you create a new ID for that?
Okay, got it. So I now understand. Thank you for clarifying. So there are two different things. One is Sandeep Bose is always going to have a unique customer ID. But how I treat Sandeep Bose will continue to evolve. It will evolve based on a few things. One, how is Sandeep Bose's behavior evolving over time? So everything that I'm doing must be fed back into the system so I can learn how Sandeep Bose is behaving differently. Sandeep Bose is a part of a certain category or a bucket or segment. How is that segment evolving? That will also impact. How are the other variables that are evolving that have a high correlation with that segment or with that customer? So all of those will have an impact, and the beauty of machine learning or deep learning solutions are, this is where predictive AI really helps, because generative AI doesn't scale like this when you're trying to make a determination. But machine learning scales really beautifully, and you can throw 100 variables at it. It will try to understand the correlations and patterns between all of those. But you have to keep doing it.
Also, when you're talking about Sandeep Bose 1 year back and today's, so are you keeping a repository of
Absolutely. You save everything. You save what you did, how somebody reacted, what were the impact, and you may want to look a snapshot, compare the snapshot of that a year from now or 6 months from now and so on. So you save everything. And you feed it back into the work.
Hello sir. Sir, I've been following your work on LinkedIn and the blogs that you post. They're very nice. In one of them you mentioned the term inversion of control, where the business has to identify the KPI at the start and then work towards it. I wanted to know, if a business has multiple objectives, then how would they decide on the particular KPI and prioritize it?
Great question. Thank you for that. So, it's very unfortunate, in my opinion, on how leaders make decisions, investment decisions. Most leaders to this date make decisions based on what they think is the highest is likely to have the highest impact. Now, what is the problem there? There is inherent bias. I'm going to do what I know or I think I know. So now, let's say I am the CEO of the company. My priorities are going to be very different from the operation manager's priorities. Very different from the CFO's priorities. Very different from the CIO's priorities and the tech team's priorities and so on. Which one should you care about the most? What is best for the business?
So, sorry, sir, would you repeat the term?
So, for example, I am the CEO of the company. I have a certain set of priorities. If you go talk to my finance team, they will have a different set of priorities. If I go to the operations team, they'll have a different set of priorities. And so on. Tech team will have a different set of priorities. Which one matters the most?
I can't decide, but finance would be the best one.
Okay. What do you think?
Ultimately, we have to prioritize revenue and, it's business.
Okay.
So I would agree with the finance team's decision.
Okay.
Depending on the objective of the organization, like what they want to achieve.
Maybe it could be a combination of multiple, where you are giving away the chance of immediate revenue gains for a sustainable future business.
Okay. So, the answer really is, it depends on what the company's strategy is. And one thing to be very clear, even though the business's health is being measured in financial terms, the finance team's priorities could be completely different from the actual financial health of the company. It is a paradox, but it's true. Almost every business you'll see this. So, it is possible that the technology team is trying to implement something like he said, which is going to yield super returns in 3 years, but it requires an upfront investment. The finance team is going to say, absolutely not. Because I have to report to the street next quarter. I want to do something that is going to yield results now. Even if it has major implications, my cost is going to go up for a certain vendor, whatever, they don't care. So, what is very, very important is, somebody said you have to prioritize. So the inversion of control is precisely that. That instead of coming up with your own ideas and saying, because I know best, I'm going to do it. Look at the entire company. Look at what is going to be the most impactful for the company. The only way to know this is to do a deep diagnosis of the company's business health. So, if you can, the ideal situation is do a deep diagnosis of your business health and create super KPIs of all of your KPIs. Revenue growth, cash flow, liquidity, profitability, risk, etc. Market share, whatever your strategy is. Unless you have a baseline, you have no idea on what you should do. So you have to have a baseline and you have to have some projections on where you are trending. If you did nothing, this is where you'll end up in 6 months, a year, and 3 years. Unless you do that exercise, you won't know. But even though it sounds nice, it's very hard to do. Maybe easy for a smaller business to do, for larger businesses, it's very, very difficult. So in that case, at least start with the KPIs you think are going to drive value for your business. Don't just depend on, oh, Sandeep said this is most important, so let's go invest all of our money in that. What is the proof? What's the validation? And worst case, if that's what you're doing, okay, but do it in very rapid iterations. Do it for a month, do it for 3 months, test, see if it's yielding value. Because innovation, you have no idea what's going to happen. So you don't want innovation to stop either. So it is a balancing act that you have to strike, but the idea of, or that notion of inversion of control is, stop, don't start with data. Bad idea. I have this data, therefore I should do this. How do you know that's the most important thing? Stop with CXO knows best. Bad idea. Start with what your baseline is, what metrics matter the most, and where you are going 3 months, 6 months, a few years down the line. Make decisions based on that. Use your data to make the decisions. And the tools are there now. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Just a second. Since he's short on time, we can only take one more question. So, yeah.
So, the concept of segment of one seems very idealistic or face value for a marketer. Also, something that is very idealistic is one KPI, one single KPI to basically see if the performance of the success. So now, have you explored the concept of one KPI to rule them all, if that is possible or not?
No. And usually not a good idea. However, most companies who, they are in, you can put almost all companies in 3 or 4 buckets. Bucket number 1, I am not going to change because I'm afraid, I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, I don't have the money. Whatever, take your pick. Bucket number 1. Bucket number 2, yes, I'm going to do AI because my board told me to do so, or because everyone is posting on LinkedIn, so I want to post something as well. I'm going to do something. Problem is, you're not prioritizing the most impactful. Bucket number 3, I'm going to do something, prioritize, do all of that, but I have no way to measure the efficacy or realize the value, or I am doing pilots, but I'm never able to move it to production and actually measure value. So those are a few buckets. Now, if you are a company in one of those buckets, you have to start somewhere. You start with a low-hanging fruit that creates belief within the organization that we can do it. And it creates that muscle of being able to design, build, execute. Then you do one KPI, but there is no one KPI will rule. Every business, every workflow needs to be AI. You have to embed AI into everything, or you should, because it can really create a lot of value for the organization. But there are practical challenges, so you start small. I'm going to be around, so catch me in the quad, and I would love to chat more. Thank you again for being so patient and so engaged.
Thank you for we got a real-world view as to how AI is being integrated into businesses. Thank you for keeping this session incredibly interactive, and love the website format as well there. Just a small request on our end. Can we click a photo with you?
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. Can I post it on LinkedIn?
Yes.